Yeah, so let's just go ahead and say that your leadership is not defined by the best moments that you've ever experienced. Leadership is actually shaped by your most consistent moments under pressure. And that's really where the rubber meets the road. If you've been involved in any high pressure circumstances, your ability to keep your cool, to stay focused, and to stay empathetic as you lead and move people through the pressure is a representation of your high emotional intelligence and is a representation of your ability to continue to lead others and to also develop them as they become young leaders. You lead more through your example than you do through your words. And let's just speak to it. We've all probably had experiences where we're not particularly excited about how we reacted or how we responded in stressful situations. But the good news is that your leadership is not defined by your best moments. It's shaped by your most consistent moments under pressure. Welcome to the Tension
This
Lab.
is the tension, the pattern you can't see. This is the moment you finally break free. Know what's running underneath before it takes you down. Welcome to the tension lab. This is your ground.
All right, welcome back to the Tension Lab. I am your host, Rudy Swigart. This is episode 14 of season 1. And if you've been tracking along, you know we're trying to put out about an episode per week. And that cadence has been rolling really well. The last week, though, I was out of the country. My family and I were on a missions trip supporting a leaders and pastors conference in Oxford, England, which was such an amazing experience and just a great trip all around to be around pastors and leaders in the faith abroad and hearing the challenges that they are up against in their current context. So today, on this episode, we're talking about why you keep falling back into the same type of reaction under pressure, even when you know better. So let's just put this real quick before we dive into things in a relationship context, say with your spouse or with your other half, whatever that looks like for you. For me, it looks like my wife and my better half. And over the years, you may recognize that you have had a pattern when the pressure gets really, really heavy. And that pattern sometimes leads you to a breaking point. Let me give you an example. I was speaking with a very close friend recently who is in his 50s, and he and his wife were having trouble with an argument, and he mentioned that at the end of the argument he walked out of the room and he broke something along the way. And I asked him what was the significance of breaking something along the way, and do you think that that was a good decision or a good healthy thing as you navigate the relationship? And he said, well, he was just so frustrated. And I said, yes, and in the frustration we also have to lead through the frustration and reflect to others that we are capable and worthy, if you will, of that leadership. So what that led me into is just kind of a deeper understanding. And one of the reasons why I wanted to record this particular episode today is because we as humans tend to run towards the defaulted patterns that we've had, that we've created for ourselves long, long ago. And for me, I don't know how it was for you, but long, long ago, for me in my younger teenage years, my default pattern was anger. And my default pattern went to anger because I felt that if I got angry enough, my parents stopped paying attention to the thing that I got in trouble for. So therefore, if I got caught, I just got angry, and that served me, at least what I thought was served me well during that time. However, that sort of pattern doesn't serve me well as an adult or in actual accountability types of relationships or roles. So we're going to be talking about in this episode about falling back into those old patterns, the same reaction under pressure, even though we know to do things differently, And I'm going to give you a tool, just like I like to do on most episodes. And when you get your hands on the book Stewarding the Tension, you'll find that each chapter has a special tool that we are talking about and going through. So in this episode, I'm also going to give you the tool. In the last episode, just a quick nod, that was on stewarding the wilderness. And the good news about stewarding the wilderness is that we get to walk through times of uncertainty and we get to handle and hold those things well. We don't have to fall back into past hurtful, harmful behaviors. Yes, there's tension, but we don't struggle because we lack a knowledge. We struggle because we don't sustain. So we're going to keep that in mind as we go into this episode is why do we fall into these past behaviors, these past issues, these past patterns, even when we know better? Because what we're after is consistency and sustainability. So then if harsh events do pop up and you find yourself falling back into past patterns, even though you know better, we're going to talk about why do you feel so inconsistent? Why do you feel like you can't just walk through the storm in the same successful way as you have in the past? Why are there still triggers that take you past that self-control barrier into a lack of self-control where behaviors start to bubble up in unhealthy ways? So when I was at work in the military, we were always on. We were always in the flow. We were always in the eye of the storm. And we had healthy outlets during that time period as well. When we don't have healthy outlets is when that tension stacks and it doesn't go away. It just stays there. You might stuff it down because you have to for the purpose of the mission. And then it shows up in ordinary moments. When a hard conversation flips you from firing on all pistons to off. Oh, I just disconnected at that point. Well, why did you disconnect at that point? You've reverted. You reverted into a mode of self-preservation, self-protection that you learned from the past that became your default when you experience things like trauma or abuse, but that's not what you were experiencing in that tough conversation. Remember, we don't lack knowledge, we lack consistency and how we move through the layers of stress. And there are emotional layers of stress. And if you've done enough of the work in this area, or maybe this is the first time you're actually hearing about these things, is you start to see how tension and stress does stack up and layer, and how your frustration levels will grow, and how your behaviors will deal with those frustration levels. And if you're in leadership, whether in the workplace, in ministry, or at home, wherever you find yourself to be the person that people gravitate towards for decisions, for strength, for solidarity, you have to recognize that in tense circumstances, in tense situations, that your stability doesn't just stabilize you, but it stabilizes the entire ecosystem. This is why first responders who arrive on scene can dictate and handle logistically what's taking place on the scene with a cool head to take care of people most of the time in those circumstances because they are trained. Their pattern is to show up in the storm and to be the calm and to be the one that is who people can look to make leadership based sound decisions. So in regression in those moments is akin to a deer in the headlights look. Like the pressure hits, the tension stacks, and we just freeze. Freezing isn't stupidity for the deer. It's the deer's strongest existing pattern for staying safe. Can you believe that? So if you're a deer and you walk out into the road and the headlights come and you stop and you freeze, that's what the deer knows to do in order to stay safe. The deer doesn't recognize that there is impending tragedy bearing down on it that will kill it if it hits it. The deer doesn't recognize that. The deer just recognizes that in order for me to survive, I need to freeze. That's not a stupid moment for the deer. That's instinct. Right? So childhood anger, like I mentioned before, became my protective tool. Right? Parents were did not pay attention to the punishment when anger hit, right? And so that pattern follows us. The pattern follows the deer into the road as an pattern follows us into our adult relationships. Some other common defaults that maybe you experience are things like speed, right? There's no pause. We just move forward in assumptions. We want to take control or avoid. In my book, The Tension, Stewarding the Tension, that's what I call the ridiculous loop. Is there's no pause. We just make assumptions we want to or we want to avoid, and that's the loop that we operate in, and that's why we fall back into past behaviors even though we know better. And there might be a frustrating portion to that as well. I did it again. I fell back into the frustrating pattern even though I know better. Why did I do that? Right? And so this is where regression will show up when we get to capacity. So when I mentioned the previous story about my friend who walked out of the room and broke something along the way, he was at capacity. He had no further capacity to be able to deal with the frustrations inside of him. So therefore there's an opportunity. There's an opportunity to learn, an opportunity to grow, an opportunity to get curious. That's my favorite phrase is get curious. Why do you think breaking that thing was what you had to do? Because if you thought that you were easing something for yourself out of your frustration, here's what you were also doing. You were facilitating now an unsafe environment for everybody around you that experienced the violence of the breaking of that thing. And those are the very people that need you to lead. Those are the very people that need you to be their safe person amidst the storms. And so when we feel under fire, when we feel under pressure, we have a tendency to regress. We go to ground into old patterns. People around you in the workplace and in your home will trust your consistency over anything else. That's why in the counseling world, we say if there's broken trust, that the best way to restore the trust is going to be consistent behavior, consistent actions, consistent behavior over time. You may never fully restore trust in your home if infidelity has come into play or something really major has happened where you have broken trust. You will spend a lifetime restoring that, and that's okay. How do you restore that? You show up consistently. That's how you restore that. Consistently changed behavior, despite what the other person does or thinks or says. Your consistent, steadfast, changed behavior is your leadership framework. People trust consistency more than intensity. In the Navy, we had things like leaders that we thought were cool when I was younger, and leaders that were not cool. And either leader was a great leader to work for if our work was consistent. Every command that I checked into, they would say, "Watch out for this person," or "Watch out for that person. They're not a good leader. They're not a cool leader." I found that I really didn't have any trouble with the folks that other people decided were not cool or not good leaders because my work ethic was consistent. Good leader, poor leader, my work ethic was going to remain the same. The inconsistent leader was the one that eroded trust. So if I couldn't trust that leader, then I would be cautious. But that didn't mean that my work ethic changed when that inconsistent leader provided me with a task. I would carry out the task as in the same manner that I would for other leaders. So there's a physical and emotional and a mental issue that takes place when there's a lack of trust in leadership for the team. I'm going to be talking about the team perspective at this point, right? The team wants to know that they can rely and trust the leader. In the family context, the family wants to know that they can rely on and trust whoever it is that is in a leadership position. I'm a man, so obviously I'm speaking from the man's perspective. Um, Men are the spiritual leaders of their home. They are called to be. They are called to steward that well. And a whole bunch of times we mess that up. We revert back to old behaviors under tension or pressure when we feel like we are at capacity. And so, what do we need to ask for? We need to ask for forgiveness and grace and come with humility, not just to say that we take responsibility for our actions, but one that says, I'm going to make a change and I'm going to get curious about why I felt that I needed to revert into those areas. So that way the ecosystem can begin to build and trust again. Same thing happens in the work environment. If the leader is inconsistent in their language, they say one thing and do another thing, or they overpromise and underdeliver, then the team begins to wonder how much can I put my trust in this person as a leader? Do I trust that they're going to make good decisions for us? Do I trust that they're going to lead us in a manner that is representative of what it is that we are trying to accomplish? So, whether you're cool or not cool in your leadership, what I wanted to just recommend or reiterate in this episode is to be consistent. Consistency is the ask. It's what others want from you and they expect from you. They don't want or expect perfection. If they do, those are unrealistic expectations. But if their understanding, if their emotional intelligence is on the rise, they're not going to ask for they're just going to ask for consistency. We just want to know where we stand from the day to day. And so the tool that we use that I mentioned earlier, that we're going to be talking about tools that we introduce, right? As we step out of our reverted patterns in poor behavior, we step into a more consistent framework of leadership in the home or at work. And instead of operating in the ridiculous loop where we want to take control or avoid and we're under stress all the time, we steward the tension well, and we move towards a more consistent loop. Here's the flow. This is how we do this. This is how we arrive at the consistency loop. We notice what's taking place around us, and we notice how our body starts to react towards pressure and tension. When somebody disrespects you, when somebody makes a unrealistic expectation or accusation towards your character or your performance or your personality, and you start to build up the framework to fire back, this is what you begin to notice. The tension is rising. How am I feeling about it? Does my chest get tight? Do my legs get tight? Do I have trouble breathing? Does my vision start to cloud? Do I start to feel like I have to defend myself? Do I start to feel like I have to get angry in order to avoid what it is that they're talking about? This is the pattern that we begin to notice. And I would encourage you, and most coaches, yeah, I'm a coach in many different segments. I'm a business coach, I'm a life coach. I've been and have experience in counseling. I'm a career coach. I help others with many different facets of their life, particularly the five F's, which is faith, family, finances, fitness, fun. We want to steward all of those things well. But when we notice these things taking shape in us, is when we can start to introduce a pause or something that says, okay, this is what's taking place inside of me. This is how I've dealt with it in the past. as my regular, neural pathway habit. And so now I want to introduce a new neural pathway habit to make the shift and to make the shift consistently. And because here's what we're after trust. We're after building and restoring trust. And that does take, it could take a long time. It could take some of us a lifetime, and that's okay. Because at the end of the day, sometimes our actions or our behaviors or the accusations are not indictments of character. They're simply fact-based conversations. So if somebody says you didn't achieve the milestone, I receive that as a fact-based observation. Oh, you know what? We were running towards that milestone. We didn't achieve it on time. Right? This is not an indictment in my character that I need to defend or point or blame why we didn't achieve it on time. Just that we have an opportunity to get consistent. I have an awareness. I'm training myself now inside the consistency loop to catch the pattern in real time. That's the awareness piece. Right? When it hits, what's my pattern? How do I catch it in real time? And there's internal signals that are going to help us with this. And I'm just going to talk about four of them real quick. The first one is frustration. If I get frustrated with a certain thing that's taking place, I'm at my capacity. That's an internal signal. That's awareness that I need to identify with language in real time so that I can shift off of it or move it in a different direction because the pattern that happened before was not productive, not helpful, sometimes healthy. It just and it would fracture or strain relationships. And we're after restoring trust, restoring relationships at home and in the workplace. So frustration is an internal signal. Defensiveness. Well, we didn't reach the milestone because Joey didn't. Well, okay. We don't need to divert. We don't need to blame, and we don't need to defend because these are not indictments of character. We have earned the right to be in the role that we're in. We belong at the table that we get to sit at. We don't need to defend these things. These are not indictments of character. That's an awareness piece that we get to catch in real time. Frustration, defensiveness, urgency, anxiety. Anxiety is where, hey, why? What am I nervous about? What am I anxious about? What am I feeling the need to protect in this moment? So the first piece in the consistency loop is just to understand what's taking place, have an awareness of how you're feeling in real time in the environment. And that's the key. Some of us go back and journal and we reflect and we say, oh man, yeah, I probably should have made a shift there. And that's the truth and that's okay. And you should continue to do that. The more you continue to do that, the more you start to feel and see these signals take place in real time. I'm frustrated. Okay, what do I do with that? I feel the need to be defensive. Do I really need to be defensive or do I keep my mouth shut? Right? Do I need to take action in an urgent way and take control despite whether or not that's required? Or am I coming home with significant anxiety and why is that? Why is that? So the first piece to the consistency loop is awareness. The second piece is the pause. We're going to build in an intentional interruption. This isn't counting to 10, right? This isn't part of the anger management strategies of just count to 10, which is helpful. But the idea is we're building in a pause. We're building in a pause which is a new pattern for you and for me because we just want to react and respond and defend and protect. And we move with the quickness that requires. However, not every circumstance requires that. Just take a breath. That's your pause. Wait one. Slow is smooth. Just take a breath. That's all we're doing here. We're aware of what's happening. You take a breath, and then we're going to come into alignment with where we need to be and how we need to respond in our leadership given the circumstances that are in front of us. So choosing your response based on who you want to be known as, not based on what you're feeling. Right? This is the emotional intelligence shift from reacting to leading yourself. So we're aware of what's taking place. We build in the pause by taking a breath. We choose the response alignment based on who I want to be known as. Hey, if I'm Rudy, I'm the intentional leader. I get to steward the tension. This is how I do it. I'm not breaking stuff. I'm not raising my voice. I'm not protecting myself against false narratives. I don't need to. So my response is based on who I want to be, not what I'm feeling. And this is the EQ shift from reaction to responding. And then we get the opportunity to go and reflect, right? No shame, no self-criticism. Oh man, I should have done that better, or I suck at this. That's not the purpose of reflection. The purpose of the reflection is, what was the piece that hooked you into moving into a different direction or a default pattern? That we call that a trigger. Some people don't like the word trigger. So in the context of what we're talking about, if that thing that hooked you is the trigger and vice versa, the trigger is the thing that hooked you, the thing that finally was the straw that broke the whatever needed to be broken in order for you to move into your old default pattern behaviors. You're gonna put that on paper in your reflection and recognize that piece. Okay, that piece is a trigger for me, and I'm going to communicate that. Communicate that so that way others know, not to defend, not to say, well, I wouldn't have acted that way if you hadn't done that, insert the hook or the trigger. That's not the point. The point is for you to understand yourself. Like, that thing is a hook, potentially. Let me get curious about that. When did that thing become a hook? And then in your reflection, I want you to ask, did I pause? Did I take a breath? And then ask, what would I adjust every single time? No shame, no self-criticism, just what took place, where your trigger or hook was. Did you pause? That's the big part. And then what needs to be adjusted for the next time? It might mean take 2 breaths. It might mean to focus on the leader that you are becoming as opposed to how you're feeling in that moment. And then we're just going to rinse, wash, and repeat, right? This is a loop, not a line, right? We're after consistency, and that's built through repetition, not through intensity. It's cyclical. It's cyclical, not linear. So if you've noticed that, hey, I don't know why I'm feeling frustrated or falling back into past behaviors, you start to recognize what it is that's happened in your pattern behavior in your lifetime. And this might feel, you might be listening to this episode thinking, man, this is so far off. Like, that sounds way too hard. I can't do that in the moment. Life happens too fast, and I'm making decisions on the fly, and people depend on that. And if I need to take a breath and wrestle with my feelings along the way, we're going to slow down production. We're going to hinder sales, and that's an issue. And I get it. I get all of that. And this might feel challenging for you, but let me give you just an idea of what victory looks like, because we're after consistency and we're after victory. So we're going to name it directly, the trigger, what it is that's taking place, the hook, right? This is formation. It's not a productivity hack. We're not after time management. We're not after how you can build bigger, better, stronger. We're after leadership formation. Leadership formation in the home and at work. Old patterns are faster because they're automatic. We're not going to slow down production, right? Fast is slow and slow is smooth. We're not going to slow things down. It feels faster the old way because it's automatic. You don't have to think about it, right? New patterns are going to require your thought, your presence, you to actually think about those things at first. And then when they become new patterns, they're going to become, secondary. You're going to be able to to do those things without even thinking anymore because that's the person that you are. And that's victory. The hooks stop demanding immediate action. That's victory. The hooks don't require you to jump into the fire. They just don't. And when I made the decision and recognized that I don't need to leap into the chaos of my family that they invite in from outside sources based on their own dysfunctional childhood, then I learned that I can pause, not to escape, not to avoid, but to be present and consistent in my reactions, to be trusted in those moments with a myriad of information that I'm charged with handling because the hooks don't demand immediate action. The shift is from I'm trying to handle this better to I am someone who responds differently. That is the shift. So if people knew you before the shift and they know you now after you've made the shift, to recognize that learning has occurred, opportunity is there, maturation takes place, we get to grow into who we want to be. In the coaching world, we say you can change your whole life in a 5-year span. In a 5-year span, you can change your entire life, and that is based on a number of many incremental things that take place over that time frame. I'm somebody who responds differently. That's the victory. The hook doesn't own me. The trigger doesn't demand immediate action. What's practiced under pressure becomes who you are in it. So here's some reflection questions for you, and then we're going to close out this episode. And by the way, before I get into these questions as we close out this episode, I just want to say thank you to all of those that have supported and shared and listened to the show and that have emailed me. I've had some great emails from folks that are engaging with the content. It is making sense to them, and they want to come on as guests, and which is amazing because I love that. I love to hear other people's stories. I want to hear your story about pattern behavior. I want to hear your story about stress. I want to hear your story about leadership. I want to hear your story about stewarding the wilderness. I want to hear your story about the transition that you came from and that you are now entering into, and how you've learned and how you're growing throughout. I want to hear those things. I want to celebrate those things because we need to normalize those things because they happen to everybody. Everybody has experienced these things in their lifetime. So the niche, if you will, or the ideal person that these episodes are for, are typically those that are, anywhere from 35 to 65 years old that have experienced some life behind them, that have some runway in front of them, that are maybe looking at newer or different career paths. Maybe they have achieved what they thought that they wanted to achieve, and now they're going to make a shift, or maybe they've been let go recently and they don't know how to deal with that, or maybe they plan an exit that they still wrestle with, that they still emotionally aren't sure who they are outside of that. And that's what I love about stewarding the wilderness, and that's what I love about personal succession planning and these types of coaching conversations, because what I learned is that it doesn't matter how much money you ever make. Some of us make a whole bunch, some of us make very little, and that's okay, because how we feel outside of the work of our hands is the same across the board. Rudy, I don't know if I can sell my company because who am I going to be without it? People are going to treat me different. I'm not going to have the excitement or the community to do life with people and to give back to a community the way that we have through my business. And the answer is that you can have all of those things. It's just going to look different. And that's okay. Here's our questions. And then we'll get ready to close out for this episode. So I want you to think of a recent moment that you didn't show up the way you wanted to under pressure. And I want you to think about what was your hook? What was your hook? What triggered it? The frustration stacked, and then the hook trigger feeling was there. And then I also want you to discern, where could my decisions have been different? And was I reacting or responding as the leader that I want to be, or was I reacting or responding in self protection, old pattern behavior? Think of that recent moment where you didn't show up the way that you wanted to under pressure. And I want you to ask, what was the hook? The next question I want you to ask is, where in the loop did you lose traction? Was it in your awareness? Were you aware that these things were happening and that you were feeling a certain way? Did you take the pause, or did you not take the pause? Did you rush through it to get to the response? Were you in alignment? Were you out of alignment? Did you take the time to reflect when it was done? Or did you just continue in repetition? Do you care about feedback? Are you okay as an adult with people telling you what to do, and where there's opportunity to grow? Are you coachable? Will you listen? If you are coachable and you will listen and you care about feedback and you give permission for somebody else to give that to you, man, you can change your whole world in 5 years or less. If you desire that, and you want a third party unbiased opinion, email me and we can talk about things like coaching engagements or what that could look like for you. A lot of what I do and what our team does is customized. I want to help you get to where you want to be, whether that's personally, financial, in your career choices, in your family, whatever that looks like. That's we're not just here to steward the tension. We're here to steward the tension well in community. That's the work that we get to do in the tension lab. Why? Because we all experience the same kind of tension. And so this is an energetic and encouraging community that desires for everybody to continue to level up. So think of that moment that you didn't show up under pressure and what triggered it. Where in the loop did you lose traction? Was it awareness, pause, alignment, reflection, or repetition? And then where might you be expecting perfection instead of committing to consistency? Right? I fall back on the story. I think it was either George Washington or Abraham Lincoln. I don't know if it's a true story or it's a true quote, but it's, you give me, one of them said, if you give me 6 hours to chop down the tree, I'm going to spend 4 hours sharpening the axe. Well, I love that because it speaks to preparation and just making sure that when you do take action, man, you're just going to run roughshod through all of it. There is a part of that that says we can spend too long sharpening the axe, and that we're looking for perfection, maybe to cut that tree down in one swing. And what happens if we don't cut the tree down in one swing? Well, then it's not perfect, then I can't swing. We got to watch out for that. Where might you be expecting perfection instead of committing to consistency? So keep an eye out for the book, Stewarding the Tension. This content on this episode comes out of one of the chapters in Stewarding the Tension that deals with who we are under pressure, how we recognize these things. I want you to keep an eye out on the social media for things like quote cards and some short snippets from this episode that will help you along your journey. And if you ever wanted to connect for any reason whatsoever, to have an honest and open, authentic conversation about what your needs are and how my team can potentially help you with that, just reach out with an email to the show like a lot of people already have. I look forward to hearing your story, potentially having you on the show as well. I'm your host, Rudy Swigart. This is The Tension Lab, and I will look forward to seeing you on the next one.
This is the tension, the pattern you can't see. This is the moment you finally break free.